Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which makes this announcement very timely. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the Disability Without Poverty Campaign 2000, Mayor Patrick Brown and members of Mississauga Council, Martin Reed and Brad Butt, for being here to raise awareness about the ongoing funding shortfalls and the urgent need to eliminate poverty for people with disabilities in our cities and across the country. The efforts these community groups are making is crucial. Their ongoing work makes a real difference for individuals living with disabilities who are striving to rise above the poverty line. In Canada, 1 in 6 people with disabilities are living in poverty. Shockingly, 1 in 3 people living with disabilities are living alone and in poverty, making their situation even more difficult without the support and resources they desperately need. The poverty rate for people living with disabilities is nearly double that of those without disabilities. Poverty should be unacceptable in a country as prosperous as Canada. So too should living in poverty as a result of a disability. The solution to this is not to increase one benefit at the expense of another. Too often do we see a pattern of taking resources away from one need to address another, and that simply does not work. The answer is not to move money around, it's to provide real sustainable support. Those living with a disability need 30% more income than they currently receive to rise above the poverty line. The Canadian Disability Benefit as it stands today is inadequate and falls far short of meeting the needs. What we urgently need is a Canadian Disability Benefit program that provides immediate relief, ensures dignity, and is accessible to all who need it. Right now, only a small fraction of those living with disabilities are eligible to receive the benefit, leaving many without the support they desperately need. I'd also like to take a moment, and recognize Ms. Andrea Zackary from Disability Without Poverty and thank her for being here today and courageously sharing her lived experience with us. As you will hear, her bravery in speaking out today is a reminder of the real-life impact of these issues. People need help, and they need it now. It's time to act. We must work with the province and the federal government to ensure those living with disabilities are seen and are heard. They must receive the financial support they need through both provincial programs and the federal Canadian Disability Benefit so they can again live with dignity. Our council has passed a resolution asking both these levels of government to act. Once again, I thank you for joining us today and helping to carry this important message forward. With that, I would like to turn the podium over to Rabia Khedr from the Disability Without Poverty group. Rabia has more than 25 years of experience in community organizing, including extensive work for disability justice causes at local, provincial, and national levels. We will then hear from Leila Sarangi from Campaign 2000. She will be sharing results and information from the 2024 Poverty Report Card. The report card highlights government's performance towards people with disabilities who live in poverty, and it's not a good report card. As mentioned, we are also pleased to have Andrea Zackary, a Deaf Outreach Coordinator for Disability Without Poverty, here to share her experiences with us today. We also have Megan here from the Mississauga Food Banks Mississauga, who always comes and always helps. We will conclude the formal remarks portion of today with remarks from Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown. Following remarks from all our speakers, we will open the floor to media questions. I'd now like to welcome Rabia to the podium.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Rabia Khedr. I'm the National Director of Disability Without Poverty. And as the Mayor has already indicated, the situation of people with disabilities is worse off than ever before. The report card we're launching today in partnership with Campaign 2000, supported by our partners, some of who are present today, Dana Milne from Community Food Centres Canada, Gift Chuma from Marcha Dimes Canada, Sahar Raza from the Daily Bread. We have been working really hard to bring that lived experience, that coalition building, that allyship forward to government and inform them about what the hard realities of living with a disability in poverty are truly about and what we need in order to rectify this. This report card reveals really hard truths. And those hard truths are Canadians with disabilities deserve better. They are living in deep, deep poverty. They cannot afford basic things like over-the-counter painkillers to mitigate the barriers that they experience on a daily basis. We need the government to deliver a more adequate benefit in 2025, and that's why we're calling on the government to in fact triple the benefit. That's our call to action today. We can't start at $200 a month because that barely scratches the surface. With rising housing costs, rising transportation costs, rising costs of shelter and food and transportation from city to city to city vary, but are extreme today for disabled people. Despite, previous opportunities to address poverty, commitments to address the state of affairs for disabled people, things are just getting worse and worse in Peel Region and in the GTA in particular. We need this benefit to be tripled. That's our call to action today on this International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We, as people with disabilities, building a grassroots movement through Disability Without Poverty from coast to coast to coast, feel that there is nothing about us without us, and we are standing up and saying nobody should be left behind. No disabled person should be left behind. So we need this benefit to be tripled in order for it to make a meaningful impact. We need it to, in fact, include everybody, have inclusive eligibility criteria that makes it easy for disabled people to access it and not create new barriers, and be fully free from clawbacks. So federal-provincial cooperation is essential to ensure no clawbacks. As I always say, the feds have the money, the provinces have the responsibility, and the cities face the challenges or problems. It's time for bold action. We urge the federal government to listen to community, fulfill its promises, and deliver a benefit that truly addresses disability poverty. To all of our partners and allies here today, your voices are vital to sending this message loud and clear. Together, we can demand the dignity, equity, and justice that people with disabilities deserve. Canada has a choice: continue failing its citizens, or lead the way toward eliminating disability poverty. Thank you, and now over to Leila Sarangi.
Thank you very much, Rabia. It's an honor to be here and to work alongside you in Disability Without Poverty. My name is Leila Sarangi. I'm the National Director of Campaign 2000, which is a pan-Canadian coalition of over 120 organizations working to end child and family poverty. And we have been tracking, monitoring, and reporting out on poverty in Canada for over 30 years. We're hosted by Family Service Toronto, a large multi-service organization in Toronto that has a big portfolio supporting adults and children labeled with developmental disabilities. And I am going to talk to you a little bit more about the findings from this year's report card. As we heard, 1 in 6 people with disabilities over the age of 15 are living in poverty. That's 1.5 million people in this country with disabilities who are living with not enough incomes to meet their basic needs. There was a huge increase between the years 2020 and 2022, the latest data that we have. That's when 208,000 more people with disabilities fell into poverty. That is an extreme growth. Women with disabilities are more likely to live in poverty than men. It's about 894,000 women with disabilities compared to 627,000 men with disabilities living in poverty. And the rates are much higher for those who live alone. About 1/3 of people with disabilities living alone are living in poverty compared to 10% of those in families. When we look at age groups, seniors with disabilities who live alone, 40% of seniors with disabilities who live alone are living in poverty. That's a very vulnerable part of the population. One of the other indicators we look at is the depth of poverty. How far away from the low income measure are incomes falling? 30%. People with disabilities, on average, need 30% more income to close that gap. The gap closed a little bit during the pandemic when the federal government injected a huge transfers to individuals and families to support them during a crisis. That poverty gap closed a bit, but over those last couple of years, again, we're seeing people falling into deeper poverty. When we look at employment, almost 2/3 of people with disabilities are employed, but that employment rate is much lower than those who do not have disabilities. And severity of disability continues to be an indicator of employment. The more severe the disability, the lower the employment rate. When we look at wages, men and women with disabilities make on average about $1.54 less than those who do not have disabilities, but women with disabilities make about $5 less than those who do not. And disability assistance programs across the country, which are within the jurisdiction of the provinces and territories, are grossly underfunded. They are a legislated state of poverty for people with disabilities. For example, in Ontario, the Ontario Disability Support Program falls $13,000 less than the low-income measure. So if you're relying on ODSP, you need another $13,000 just to bring you up to the poverty line. That's not even a thriving income. And last, I'll just end, as we think about designing a federal benefit and benefits for people with disabilities, we need to make sure that they're accessible. The Canadian Survey of Disabilities found that 1/4 of people with disabilities reported barriers to access both in person and by voice over the phone with the general public, customer service, or government representatives. Nearly 13% of people with disabilities reported barriers to online access to government information, services, and support. And nearly 11% of people with disabilities reported barriers to accessibility with staff of government services or programs. So as we're developing the adequacy of the benefit, we need to ensure there's accessibility, broad accessibility, and design it with people who are living with disabilities so we can understand what those barriers are and dismantle them. Thank you, and now I would like to welcome Andrea to the podium.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us today to support our incredible movement here with Disability Without Poverty. My name is Andrea Zackary, and I'm an oral deaf individual, and I've been proud to be involved with Disability Without Poverty as a community lead advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing community since 2021, with the focus specifically on advancing the Canada Disability Benefit. I'm also the founder of my own business, Deaf Events and Beyond, a company I established in 2014 in Brampton, Ontario. Our mission is to empower the deaf and hard of hearing community and to bridge social gaps through inclusive events. As a mother of 6, I've been running my company for nearly a decade. And yet, despite my hard work, my family continues to face financial struggles. Like many others in the disability, deaf, and hard of hearing community, we encounter significant challenges in meeting our basic needs. Even though I report all of my earnings to ODSP, it's still not enough to cover the cost of essential assistive devices such as hearing aids, specialized alarm clocks, and safety equipment. Programs like the Assistive Devices Program, or ADP, do provide some help, but they don't cover enough for working Canadians with disabilities. For example, I often have to pay out of pocket for ASL English interpreters for meetings, which highlights the barriers we face in accessing language and communication. This is the reason why we must fight to rise above the poverty line. Disabled individuals deserve to live a life that is fulfilling and with dignity. You may not know, but people with disabilities are twice as likely to live in poverty because of the barriers we face in accessing housing, employment, and other opportunities. In the deaf and hard of hearing community alone, in my community, the unemployment rate is a staggering 37.5%.
Let's be honest here.
Let's be honest here. Simply put, $200 a month is not enough to make it. It's not enough for my family. It's not enough for the countless other disabled Canadians trapped in the deepest levels of poverty. Our government at all levels has failed to adequately support the disability community, and we cannot afford to wait any longer. Change must happen now. Let me end with a clear message. Nothing about us without us. We demand an end to legislated poverty for people with disabilities now. Thank you. I'd also like to welcome Mayor Patrick Brown to the podium.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you for having the courage to share your story. It's an honor to join you here today for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Today, we shine a light on the critical issues surrounding disability and poverty in Canada. I'd like to thank Rabia, Leila, and Andrea for your unwavering commitment to disability justice and equity. And to Rabia, I'd like to say she is a force of nature who can bring us all together behind a cause we believe dearly in. And a special acknowledgement to my friend Mayor Carolyn Parrish for hosting us all here today at Mississauga City Hall for this important event. Disability Without Poverty and Campaign 2000 deserve immense credit for bringing forward the 2024 Poverty Report Card. This is a sobering report. It highlights the urgent need for systemic change. While it's difficult to see Canada earn a failing grade in addressing disability poverty, this report is a necessary call to action, a reminder that we cannot be complacent. Locally, my lens is always local. In Brampton, we recognize that poverty and accessibility barriers are interconnected challenges, and addressing them is a council-driven priority. We have a strategic plan from 2022 to 2026 advancing these goals to make sure that public spaces are accessible, communications, transportation, and customer service is as well. We celebrate champions of inclusivity in our community through the Accessibility Awards programs, highlighting the efforts of local businesses, individuals, and organizations committed to making Brampton barrier-free. Council has also driven the development of an inclusive recreation programs, ensuring individuals with disabilities can fully participate and thrive in our city. And our accessible Brampton transit services reflect our belief that mobility is a right, not a privilege, providing priority seating and features to empower independent travel. And while cities like Brampton and Mississauga are making strides, it is unequivocally clear with this report card that the Canada Disability Benefit as it stands is inadequate to meet the critical needs of persons with disabilities, particularly in Peel Region. The cost of living in Peel Region, as in many urban centres, is rising steadily. Persons with disabilities, already burdened by additional costs associated with living with a disability, face insurmountable challenges in securing housing, accessing services, and affording basic necessities. The federal benefit is designed, if designed appropriately, has the potential to be transformative. However, the current proposed levels fall short of lifting individuals out of poverty. Many are left to rely on insufficient provincial supports which do not reflect the unique pressures of urban living. Moreover, the application process must be simplified. Many individuals in our community encounter significant barriers to navigating complex bureaucracies, leaving them without the support they desperately need. In Peel Region, the failure to adequately address disability poverty has cascading effects, increased reliance on municipal social services and community support networks, which are already stretched thin. Heightened vulnerability for disabled individuals to housing insecurity and food insecurity, and when we see this growth outpacing infrastructure and funding. a growing disparity between federal commitments and the lived realities of disabled individuals in our cities. And so today I join Rabia, Leila, Andrea in urging the federal government to revise and strengthen the Canada Disability Benefit. It must be adequate to cover both basic needs and the additional costs of living with a disability. It must be individualized and responsive to personal circumstances, avoiding the harmful effects of household-based means testing. It must ensure the provincial clawbacks are strictly prohibited, preserving the full impact of the benefit for those it is intended to help. So proud to stand with these disability leaders, and we hope that our call will be heard by the federal government.
Okay, with that, we don't see any more questions in the room, so I'm going to call this press conference to a close. Thank you very much for joining, and have a wonderful day.